When I first saw the Death Star in Star Wars, I thought, wow, that thing is huge. But as I dug deeper into the actual size of it, I was floored by how its scale stacked up against other ships in the Star Wars universe and against things in our own world. Spoiler alert, some ships might be smaller than you'd expect, while others are outright mind-bogglingly huge. Imagine Earth scaled down to the size of this watermelon. The Death Star, it would only be as big as a pea, and that's the so-called destroyer of worlds.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
In Star Wars, spaceships often lack relatable scale. They're always next to planets, floating in space, or docked at arbitrary sci-fi cities. And that got me wondering, what would these ships look like in familiar contexts? In this video, I'll explore the true scale of iconic Star Wars ships and how they compare to things we see every day. Let's start with a classic, the Millennium Falcon. At about 34 by 34 meters, it's comparable in size to an Olympic swimming pool, which is 50 meters long and 25 meters wide. It's also about as long as a Boeing 737, which carries hundreds of passengers. 3 times the length of a city bus. If parked on a highway, it would stretch across 7 lanes of traffic. And fun fact, the Millennium Falcon actually made a brief appearance in Star Trek First Contact. Thanks to John Knoll of Industrial Light and Magic, the Falcon was snuck in as an Easter egg during the Battle of Sector 001. The AT-AT is up next. Standing at 22.5 meters tall, it's roughly the height of a 7-story building or 3 giraffes stacked on top of each other. The body alone is as long as a shipping container, and its legs can cover ground with the stride of a small jetliner. Seeing it stomping down your street would be both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Mission accomplished, Empire. Now for the big leagues, the Imperial Star Destroyer. At 1,600 meters long, it's conveniently about a mile, making it an unofficial unit of distance here in the US. That's equivalent to 5 US Navy Nimitz-class aircraft carriers lined up end-to-end, or twice the size of the Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building. One Star Destroyer is basically a flying mile-long skyscraper. At the height of the Empire, there were around 25,000 Star Destroyers in operation, all manufactured at the Kuwait shipyards, a massive floating ring with 300 kilometers of habitable area. The Star Destroyer program was rumored to have consumed half of the Empire's budget, with 25,000 ships and 50,000 crew members per ship, adding up to a staggering workforce of 1.25 billion people. Imagine the cost of salaries, pensions, and logistics. It would make Earth's F-35 program seem cheap in comparison. Now let's dip into the prequels with the Trade Federation Battleship. You know, the ship that looks like someone took a bite out of a donut. At 3 kilometers in diameter, it's wide enough to fit an entire Star Destroyer across its radius, like clock hands pointing at 6 and 12. For comparison, it's about 30 times the width of a football field, or roughly half the size of Manhattan's Central Park. It's a floating fortress of galactic capitalism. And who says trade disputes can't be interesting? And then there's the Executor, Darth Vader's super Star Destroyer. Clocking in at 19 kilometers long, it's almost 20 times the length of a standard Star Destroyer. This thing is colossal. It's the size of Manhattan, with Harlem at one end, Central Park in the middle, and Wall Street at the other. For a real-world comparison, it's longer than the Golden Gate Bridge by a factor of 4. It was so large that it had a beltway running the length of the ship for cargo and personnel transport. Think of an airport baggage claim, but miles long. Of course, like all massive Star Wars ships, the Executor had one critical weakness. Target the bridge and the entire ship is doomed. Now for the main event, the 2 Death Stars. The first Death Star from A New Hope was reportedly 100 miles in diameter, employing over 1 million crew members, which is more than half the population of San Francisco. With 357 internal levels and a habitable crust, it was self-sustaining for up to 3 years. The second Death Star from Return of the Jedi was even larger at 1.5 times the size of Pluto's moon Charon. If that size is accurate, the Emperor's fall down the reactor shaft would have been the longest death scene in cinematic history. At terminal velocity, it would have taken over 2 hours for him to hit the core. Regardless of the exact size, both Death Stars were undeniably massive. When the Executor crashes into the surface of Death Star 2, there's no curvature visible, suggesting that the station size might have been even bigger than we think. In fact, the Death Star might have been large enough to generate its own gravity, pulling the ship into its surface. Finally, we have the Starkiller Base from The Force Awakens. At 660 kilometers wide, it's the largest station in Star Wars canon. While massive, it's still 34 times smaller in volume than our own moon, an oddly efficient design for something capable of destroying entire star systems. If placed on Earth, it would stretch across multiple US states, roughly the distance from New York City to Chicago. Now, from watermelon-sized Death Stars to skyscraper-sized Star Destroyers, this deep dive gave me a whole new perspective on the scale of Star Wars ships, and I hope it did the same for you. If you know someone who would think this is interesting, share this video with them. And hey, thanks for watching and subscribe for more.